So essentially, the best negotiation is when you have alternatives. Obviously, if you don't have alternatives, then it's very hard for you to play poker with. Here is the idea, right? You play poker for the first time in your life. You have poor hand, and you play against professional player, right? That's the idea. So it's very hard for you to bluff, right? You don't even know how to bluff, or maybe you're not good at it, but maybe you're good at it, but you haven't practiced enough. And you play against professional players, right? So they know when you're bluffing. But in reality, if you want to get the deal that you want, you need to say no to the deal that you don't want. This is very hard, in particular if this is the only option that you have. So imagine that this is only venture capitalists, only one said yes, we would like to invest. And then they came out with the terms and you don't like the terms. The only way that you can dramatically change that is by saying no. But then you might end up with nothing, right? Playing poker. So they have some secrets of making decisions. That's pretty it. Some bullshit that we will hear. We know everything, right? Or we have seen companies like you, and usually they haven't, right? You get there. When you go to raise capital, you already baked the concept in your mind and with your team so much that there is no one that knows as much as you do. And so if someone will tell you we know more than you do, then they're simply bullshitting. Name dropping, that's usually not the case. When they say we have this and this and this and this and this person that can help, they don't have them. And this is usually, by the way, a good sign, because if they drop names, that basically means that they would like to invest. They're trying to convince you that they can help. We usually do that. We never do that. Doesn't exist, right? So this is absolutely nothing. We can be very fast. Doesn't happen. And so this is one part of it. Sometimes people come to me and say, we have this person that can help us to get funded. They can't. If you cannot get funded by yourself, there is no one that can help you. And so if you find an investment pimp or a middleman, and it's quite obvious that I don't like middlemen, right? Then here's the problem, right? You're unable to get in front of investors by yourself. You need someone to help you to get there, right? If this is a good investor, then this good investor asks themselves two questions. One, if this startup is good or this CEO is good, why do they need someone to bring them here? And second, am I really going to invest a lot of money and 5% will go into this broker? I want the company to go into the company. And so the reality is that usually investors don't like a middleman as well. And in some cases, they would basically say, we are not going to invest, or this is going to be at your own expense and not our own, at the venture capital's money. There are 100 different ways to say no. I heard all of them. So you cannot surprise me with a new way of saying no, right? And it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if we are saying they invest only if they like the story and like the CEO, if they say no, it means that they either didn't like the CEO or they didn't like the story. It doesn't matter anymore. And so whatever they'll say, Google can do that in no time, or we have few competitions, or the market is hard, the market is easy, there are no entry barrier, there is a huge entry barrier, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter. You don't even need to answer. You don't even need to listen to it. It doesn't matter. It's simply no. And then you basically say, thank you for considering. We will update you as soon as there are updates. And essentially what it means is that you would update them as soon as you get a term sheet, because only then they might change their mind. I don't know what's the dynamic here. Different dynamics between different VCs based on geographies, right? So in Israel, I would say a VC would like to invest with someone else, so they're not the only one that is thinking it's a good idea. In the US, VC would like to invest by themselves. If they think it's good, they want the whole pie for themselves. So different cultures might have different behavior. Not sure what's the behavior here, but in general, find out. If you're looking to go and raise capital, find out what is likely, and figure out that if they like to be by themselves, then you need to tell them that there is competition. If they like to co-invest with someone else, then you don't tell them that there is a competition, because then they will wait, right? If you'll tell them there is another one that is express interest, then they will say, okay, let's connect with the other one. And if there isn't one, then you lose the game there. If they say no, listen to the content, not to the fact that they say no, because this is really discouraging. This is where you're going home crying that they say no, right? And if you have multiple meetings at the same day and all of them say no, then you feel exhausted, and you feel that you lost it, right? And in reality, tomorrow is a new day. But so you don't listen to the no. You listen to the content. If the content repeats itself, then it's worthwhile of doing something. If not, it's simply you don't care. As I mentioned, they make decisions based on their gut feeling. The first meeting decision is usually the one that will set the tone for the rest of the journey. Very few will say on the first meeting we would like to invest, and later on we'll change that. So we might end up with not figuring out the right deal, but they still would like to invest. And I think I mentioned that with the waze story, how we raise capital. I'm going to skip some of those slides. This is interesting. So end of the day, the main negotiation is how much for how much, right? So how much you are going to invest, and what's the pre-money or post-money valuation of the company. So how many percentage you're going to get. And this is the main deal, right? At the end of the day, you need to, in your mind, think of the future, right? So if I'm going to be diluted by 50% now, and next round I will be diluted by additional 40% and so forth. So down the road, 5 years down the road, how much percentage would I have? And that might dictate your fundraising strategy. So this is part of it. The other part of it is that there are many other aspects in the term sheet, many other aspects in the deal that you should seriously consider. Usually, I would say you want to raise capital for an order of magnitude of between 18 to 24 months. So you would have enough time to reach significant milestones that will allow you to raise additional funding round, and have enough time to do that, right? So you assume that it will take you 6 months. And so if you imagine that with this capital that you just raised, you would have, it will take you a year to get to the milestone that you need, then I want you to think of the following. You need 18 months of run rate, and then additional 6 months of run rate to be able to raise the next round. So 18 months instead of 12 that you believe, and additional 6 for raise the next financing round. That's the amount of money that you want to raise. For how much? Negotiation. Simply negotiation. And negotiation become much better when you have alternatives, right? Because then as soon as you have the first alternative, and let's say this is the deal that you have, you go and speak with the rest of the VCs and you tell them this is the deal that you have, right? So you bluff, right? Because you have a fallback. This is your fallback. If someone says here at this level, then guess what? The next dialogues that you have are actually saying, I have this deal. and you want someone to actually compare or match this deal. And so you use the steps based on the opportunities that you have. Obviously, you need to create all of those. So getting one investor to say yes is hard. Getting 2 or 3 or 4 investors to say yes at the same round, it's even harder. But this is how you're going to plan that. Whether or not we'll be able to, if the story is good and we know how to tell a good story, then we will get there. So we don't go before we are ready, and we are ready once we learn how to tell the story, and once we have a good story to tell, and once we practice that with those that are not going to invest. And then we try to go to all the venture capitals at once in a very, very short period of time, because number one, they speak to each other. And so we don't want to have them enough time to actually discuss this, what we have seen and so forth. The other one is that if you're trying to raise capital for a long period of time, then they're starting to ask themselves, what's wrong with them, right? So investors would start to ask, what's wrong with this company that we're unable to raise capital? And that's why you prepare yourself into the level that at this level you go and try to meet all of the venture capitals or all of the relevant investors in a very short period of time. I think we mentioned that strongest point at the beginning. They are users too. Tell a good story. Think of their agenda, which is dramatic, right? So this is very, very important. If we don't think of their agenda, we are selling something that they don't care about. Some dark side. You should listen to this video. Vinod Khosla, one of the better VCs in the Valley, once said that 80% of the investors create more damage than help. Now, if this is the case, by the way, give me someone that is not interfering at all, and there is at least no damage. And that will be pretty good, actually. Now, this is important, right? As soon as they invest, you cannot get rid of them. In the same way that they are going to do due diligence, you should be doing due diligence. And go and speak with companies that they invested at. And in particular, go and speak with companies that they invested at after the company was shut down or after the company was sold. Because only then you'll get the real perspective of how this person is on your board or as an investor. You know, in many cases, you tend to believe that they would support you along the way. But they will only support you if they think you're going to be successful. And most of the time, in this journey of startup, we are fighting uphill battles. And we have hard time. And most of the days, it looks like we are not making progress. So very likely that they would lose attention, or they would think that we are not going to make it over time. We are sometimes thinking that we are not going to make it. So obviously they would think the same. So if this is the case, then we really want to know that they are going to support us through the hardship. When everything goes smooth, that's easy. We don't need them, by the way. Then it's easy for us to get a new funding, right? If we have traction, if we are being successful already, then a lot of venture capitalists would like to invest. That's easy. If we are in the period of time that we have a hard time, that we are not making progress, that things don't work, we need their support. Now, we don't know. If we will ask them, obviously they will say, of course we will support you, whatever it takes, right? But in reality, the only way to find out is to speak with other CEOs that they invested in their companies, and they will tell them if they are supporting the companies through the hardship or not. Some indicators, right? So good indicators, if they're speaking about the deal, right? So you are meeting them and they're asking, so how much you are going to raise and at what valuation? That's actually a good indication, very good indication. Excellent indication would be if they're starting to ask about who else are you meeting, or who are the previous investors. that means that they're starting to think of, okay, we would like to get involved, and we're trying to figure out who else is around just to make sure that we actually have good relationship with them. If they're starting to suggest some comments about how to improve the presentation, that means that they would like you to meet other partners in the fund, and they want to, as the one that brings them to the rest of the partners, they want to be the heroes, and therefore they want to build the presentation in such a way that other partners will say yes, and then they will turn out to be the heroes. If this is the case, then this is actually very, very good indication. By the way, you shouldn't listen. So think about it, right? So I'm going and meeting one partner with my presentation, with my lousy sheet hall presentations, and I'm able to convince that guy that he wants to invest, right? So why should I change that? If it ain't broken, don't fix it. It's working, yes.
And if they copy your idea?
No one does. Who is they? Investors? They're investors, they're not entrepreneurs. Think about it this way, right? You are already in this process for a long period of time, right? It's not just the idea. It's all the thoughts that you have invested in that. It's all the dialogues that you had. It's all the progress that you have made in your mindset about this concept, right? It's not just an idea. It's way beyond an idea. That's the period of time that it takes you to fall in love with that, right? And feel confident about telling other people. If you're not telling other people, that means that you are still in an earlier stage of that. So if someone will ask me, okay, but I want to tell you your idea, but I'm afraid that you'll take that and please sign an NDA, then I'll say, okay, come back to me when you realize that you don't need an NDA. Because it's simply too early in the phase. If you already invested in building a prototype or building a team and recruiting people around you, no one is going to take that. No one is going to take that. Now, investors in particular, they're not going to take this idea. They are incapable of building stuff. They are capable of putting money into stuff. Not from investors. When I had dialogues with regards to partnerships, then possibly yes. In some cases, yes. Because then you go to someone that is capable of building stuff. So the first answer will be never. The second one will be always too late. But in reality, if the problem disappears, if the problem that you started to solve disappears, then there is no reason for you to keep on trying. Other than that, you'll never give up. No, because that's actually giving up because of no reason, right? No good reason. If the problem disappears, then I would say give up. If not, keep on fighting for that to be successful. Now, if the team is not right and you have harder time to survive there, or it's not good, then it might be a good thing to actually walk away, because then you have built something that is wrong and you are unable to fix. So assume that the environment becomes not your dream, right? Not what you hope for. Then that would be okay for you to leave. If they start to selling the fund, right? All of a sudden they're starting to explain why their fund is excellent and why they're exactly the fund for you and why they can help you in many places. And we know this guy and this guy and this guy. That's actually a good indicator. Everything else, it's bad. It's no. So at the end of the day, after the meeting, ask yourself, okay, do I have any good indicators? And if not, then it's simply no. Now, if it's no, the only thing that you need to do is say, send them an email, thank you for the meeting. That was very refreshing, very whatever you want to say. And I will update you as soon as I have new updates. And you only update them once you have a term sheet. Just wonder, I will actually go into there. I'm not sure that all of you are familiar. Have anyone here seen a term sheet before? Okay, not a lot. So look, the term sheet will eventually deal with the terms of the deal, and the most important one is how much money is going to be invested for what share of the company, right? But other than that, there will be dialogues about liquidation preferences. So what happened when there is an exit, and all of those seems to be no one cares at the beginning, but will end up as very, very important at the end. And so the most important part is that you need to have someone to help you with understanding the term sheet. What does it mean? And give you examples, right? So ask your lawyer, give me examples, right? Because they will explain that, okay, liquidation preferences means that first of all, when there is an exit, the investors get their money back, and then they get interest, and only then you share the equal parts of the stocks, right? That will be 1x participating liquidation preferences. And it doesn't sound like a lot, right? But just imagine that you have first round investment that invested, let's say, $3 million, and then next round $10 million, and then you become actually fairly successful in your journey, and you raise $50 million, and then company keep on growing, and all of a sudden it's starting to go down, and then you sell the company here at $200 million, right? So pretty good deal, right? The investor of the $50 million takes $50 million after the 200, and then it takes their 8% a year interest rate. And then the investor of the second round that invested $10 million takes their $10 million, and the first investor takes their $3 million, and now we have much smaller cake to distribute. Now, if the deal was not 200, was just 100, then there is less than half of the deal, or half of the cake to distribute. So this might become important. Find someone that can help you to understand and steer through all of those terms. The beauty of that is that you are going to negotiate with the same passion all the terms, right? So first of all, you will negotiate the valuation, and then you'll negotiate the liquidation preferences and ESOP allocation and whatever. And then eventually there is one section in the term sheet that says that the company will pay the investor's lawyer fees. And that's usually when people actually get pretty frustrated. By the way, what to do with that? The way that it usually states is the company will pay reasonable legal fees of the investor's legal team up to X. And simply remove the up to. Will pay X, right? Because then, if it says up to X, then their legal is going to put so much effort, so many hours to get into this amount of money. And during this period of time, they are simply going to waste yours. So tell them that you'll get X. This is it, right? And then all of a sudden, they'll figure out that they only need 2 hours to invest in this deal. Okay, we mentioned, I think, all of those. One-man show. Now, not only the negotiation. Sometimes we have the tendency that we are going into a VC meetings and I'm going to bring the whole team with me. That's absolutely wrong. If we say that they are going to invest if they like the CEO and like the story, then if I bring more people with me, they're taking pieces of the stage. And I need to shine. As a CEO, I need to shine there. I don't want anyone else to take any piece of the light from me. I want to be in the center of the stage and alone there, so I can make the best impression that I can. If there is someone else, and that someone else speaks a lot, then they would ask themselves, so who exactly is the CEO here? If that someone doesn't open his mouth and doesn't say anything, then they would ask themselves, so why did the CEO bring this guy if he doesn't say anything? There is no way that you can win if you bring the team. Not on the first meeting. If they say yes, that they're interested, they will tell you that we would like to see the rest of the team. That's excellent. Also with the negotiation. If you are the CEO, you are going to negotiate all the deal by yourself, with help, with a lot of help. But you're going to be in the front. There is no one else that you want to, you don't want the rest of the partners to actually help in the negotiation. they can only interfere. They can only create more damage than help. You have legal advisor. If you have a mentor that can guide you, that's excellent. But other than that, no one else. Storytelling. Look, in storytelling, we're trying to create emotional engagement. We want them to feel something. In reality, we want them to deliver a feeling to them. And usually, the easiest way is the frustration. Frustration is the easiest feeling, emotion to convey, right? And so you want to put them in a position that they imagine themselves in a similar situation. And when they imagine themselves in a similar situation, you encourage their emotions to the level that they stop thinking and start using their gut feeling. And this is exactly what we want. We want them to want you to solve that problem. Some of the strong emotions, love or hate or feeling stuck or frustration, anger, revenge, right? So if we can bring them into thinking of revenge, then that will be very powerful emotion. It doesn't matter which emotion. One of those, the story needs to encourage that and create that and deliver that emotion so they would feel that. So summarizing, CEO by herself is going to raise capital. No one else. No one else. Look, if I have my, if I would take my CEO and go to meet, in any of the startups, I would go with the CEO to meet the venture capital. There are two options here. One is that I, remain in the dark or in the back side, and then the key question would be, why did the CEO bring me to the meeting? And the other one is that I'm pretty dominant in the meeting. If I'm pretty dominant in the meeting, then the answers is that they're going to like the story, but they're not going to like the CEO. I'm not going with my CEOs to meet venture capitalists. I will be paving the road for them. I will have a dialogue beforehand with the investors and explain to them why the CEO is the amazing CEO that they have and why the story is so amazing. But I cannot be there with the CEO together. The CEO has to be there by herself. No one else. And the other part is that at the same time, the company needs to keep on moving forward. It might take 6 months, it might take 9 months to raise capital. If the company is stuck for this period of time, then, throughout the dialogues, we will meet the same investors again and again. And they would ask us, okay, so how much progress have you made since then? And if it's nothing, then here's the answer. Okay, so a few more things. So I think I will be okay with sharing economy and startups. Do we want to do a 5 minutes break? No? Excellent. Perfect. So look, I realize that this is a lot of things that I'm covering here today. And I'm trying to dense years of experience into few hours. And a few aspects to that. One is that you still have the presentation, and pretty soon I think the video will be ready, so you can actually re-listen to that or re-watch that if needed. But the more important part is that if we don't do that, then my feeling is that you're going to lack some of the critical tools that you would need in order to build a startup. Now, I know that not all of you are going to build a startup tomorrow morning because we have a session tomorrow morning, right? So you will not be able to do that tomorrow morning, but as soon as you do, and it doesn't matter, by the way, if you think this is only for startup, then just imagine that you are in a corporate and you want to have a new project and you need to go to the boss's boss to get funding for the new project. It's the same. It's exactly the same. And all of those tools are essentially critical for you to become successful in your job, whatever it is, right? So obviously, I'm looking at it from a startup perspective, but you can easily take that anywhere. So sharing economy, and at the end of the day, sharing economy is about increased efficiency. Now, a lot of people saying sharing economy is not always that we know exactly what we are talking about. So let's look at different things that we can actually share. And one of them is knowledge. Right? So we can crowdsource. It's a way of sharing knowledge, right? Waze is essentially crowdsource. So three different models of crowdsource, right? So one is Wikipedia, right? So crowdsourcing of information. Everyone adds information as they know it, and everyone else is using the information that was created by other people. Google search is crowdsourced, right? But automatically done. So every time that we are searching for something, we get a list of different, search results, and when we pick one, it actually updates the algorithm of Google that basically says when people are looking for this, this is what they want to see as the first result, right? And it gives a higher score to that, and the result is that crowdsourcing is generating the scoring results of Google search engine. Waze is actually using both automatic and active participation, right? So active participation to provide street names, house numbers, and so forth, and automatic of monitoring the GPS and figuring out where people are, how fast they are going, and therefore where traffic jams are. So this is sharing knowledge. The other one is exchanging of underutilized resources, right? So if I'm not using something, then maybe someone else can use that for now. Maybe I can sell that to someone else. Maybe I can let it to someone else and then get it back. If we want an example of sharing resources like that, so any marketplace will be like that, right? So StubHub, it's a marketplace for event tickets, right? So if you have an annual or a season ticket for your home team, and you're not going to go to a certain game, then simply let someone else use the current ticket for that particular game and get money for that. Very simple. Usually, when we are starting to think of sharing resources, then we're starting to think of actually sharing actual resource and using it multiple times for different reasons. The best example is actually hotel room. Right? I'm using this room tonight, and tomorrow someone else is going to use the same room. And the day after, it's someone else. So this is a complete business model that basically says this is exactly what we are building. We are building something for infrequent use for a short period of time, and a lot of people using that throughout the year. So hotel rooms will be an excellent example. We can do the same with car rental, right? Car rental is exactly the same model. Taxi driver is the same model. So nearly everything that we buy by the hour or by a slot of time is sharing a resource. But recently, we're starting to think more of sharing resources at the same time. So carpool, right? So few people are using the same car at the same time. Now, I want you to think about it. Your car. Who has a car here? Raise your hand. Okay, so usually we are using our car less than 10% of the day, right? So if we are in a place that with not a lot of traffic jams, then it's about 4% of the day we are using our car. 1 hour a day. The rest of the 23 hours, the car is actually not only that it's not being used, it's actually occupying a parking place. So it's even creating more damage than help. And we easily would agree that someone else might be using our car when we don't need that, right? So usually within a family, that will be, the kids will be using the car and so forth. Or maybe we have one car and we share that with with our spouse and so forth. But carpool is something else. Is even in the 1 hour that we are using our car, we are actually only using one seat of the car, right? So there are other seats there that are available, and we can actually share that and use that at the same time. That will become very important when we start to think about traffic. But other than that, it's not increasing the utilizations of the car dramatically. It's increased the utilization of the roadways dramatically. And so there are different levels of sharing economies that we are looking for: sharing information, exchanging resources, and sharing resources. And all of them exist in different layers, right? So I think that many of them change over time, right? So 20 years ago, there was nearly nothing that was using crowdsource to create information that is not otherwise available. And then in around year 2000, Wikipedia started and created a very strong notion. It took them 11 years to disrupt the market to the level that Britannica went out of business. So year 2000, Wikipedia started. Year 2011, Britannica shut down their consumer product. But the concept of sharing resources exists for a long period of time. Usually expensive resources are easier to share. If we have different concepts of that we would like to build a marketplace for sharing tools, right, or sharing camping equipment, or sharing different things. So if I'm not using them right now, then someone else might be using them and paying me rent for that. The problem in all of those models is the cost of transaction. So if I need to let someone my drill or my jigsaw, whatever tool I have, I'm perfectly okay with doing that. In most cases, sometimes people don't want to do that, but I'm not willing to pay the time to make that transaction work, right? So I'm not going to drive that to someone, and someone is not going to come over to my place to pick that up. And so the transaction cost, or the ability to actually make the transaction work, is very, very complex. So we mentioned all of those. Google, Wikipedia, Waze has different models for crowdsource. Look, the importance of crowdsource. By the way, we're using crowdsource in order to figure out the fees at FeeX. We are using crowdsource in a lot of my startups because it's the fastest way to figure out information that is not available. If information is not available, crowdsource will be the fastest way to create that. And this is very dramatic. Now, the importance part of crowdsource is that you build your model with no validation. If you add validation, you slow down the process. And the biggest advantage of crowdsource is that critical mass of knowledge is being created fast, really fast. If you try to validate the information, you simply end up with a process that is too slow, and you lose the advantage of crowdsource. And you need to live with that, right? And now figure that out. We have no validation at Waze. We don't know what people are adding to the map. We simply don't know, right? So if someone is calling a road with a different name, then we wouldn't know. We simply wouldn't know. If there is an official name for the road and still the people are using a different name for that road, then we wouldn't know. We don't validate anything. We created a system for the other users to validate information, but ourselves, we don't validate. And that's very powerful. Now, when you think about it, you say, but how do you know? I don't know. If people care, they will fix it. If they don't care, then it doesn't matter. So we build tools for the users. The more important part is that the speed is more important than the validity. Now imagine that when you use Waze, you can actually report different things along the route, right? So you can report that there is an accident or speed trap or whatever, right? The way that it's being validated is by other users. So let's say that you mark that there is a policeman there or a speed trap there, right? So the next user will get an alert that there is a speed trap there, and they might say it's there or not respond at all. But very soon we will have some responses that either say thumb up, which means that it's there, or say it's not there anymore, and then we will fix it, right? So it's very possible that for a short period of time we had wrong information. The speed is much more important than the validity of the information. The speed is much more important in crowdsourcing. And you build a self-correction mechanism. So if you take a snapshot, it might not be accurate. If you look at it over time, it's more accurate where it's relevant and less accurate where it's not relevant. Right? So if we have a small village someplace and not a lot of users, then maybe we don't have the complete map there. Maybe we don't even have that on the map. And at the same time, I would say, look, it's a small village. There are no users there. Then it's not really on the map. No one cares. And that's the beauty of crowdsourcing. It creates better and faster relevant information. And not necessarily will have full coverage. Some few things about crowdsource when you build it. Very critical is that you trust the providers of the information. Now, if you do validation, you don't trust them. If you don't trust them, they're not going to be there. They are there for different reasons. They are there for the reason that you empower them and give them the tools to actually prove themselves as experts in specific field, right? And it might be because they know the neighborhood. It might be because in Wikipedia that they know exactly this particular field, and they want to express their expertise. If you validate them, you don't trust their expertise. You don't trust them, they will not come. You empower them, you reward them. Now, the reward is very, very important. So people ask me, do you pay the community or do you pay the participations? You don't pay. There is no model that you can pay. So when you come to think about it, there are only two models that you can reward with money contribution like that, right? One is to say, I'm going to price an edit of the map, right? And that's going to be 2 cents, right? Or 5 cents or 10 cents, right? And then someone is doing 200 edits on the map and you give them $20 at the end of the month, and this is insulting. And the other one is that you say, you know what, I'm going to reward only the top 10. And then number 11 leaves. They don't believe that they are number 11. If there is no reward, they do believe. If there is reward, they don't believe. And so the only reward is through recognition. You give them ranks, you give them, you highlight how much contribution they've made, you enable them, you empower the reason that they are there. They are there in order to demonstrate their expertise. And so you empower that and you highlight that and you tell them that they are expert and you show that they are expert, and then they'll stay. An issue of creating critical mass of data. If the information is cumulative over time, like the map, then you can rely on active participation. If the nature of the information is temporary or real time, like traffic information, it has to be in passive contribution. You cannot reach critical mass of real-time information through active participations. People are not going to participate actively that long. They will try, and they will figure out that this needs, forever maintenance, and they will quit. Marketplace. So essentially, we are looking at the reuse of underutilized resources. So just figure out how many stuff you have at home that you're not using, and you can sell all of them on eBay, right? So all the stuff that you don't use, you can sell at eBay. So anything that will be eBay, I recently have seen, and I learned that from my daughters, is that when I look at their closet, half of the stuff, it's not theirs, right? So they keep on exchanging clothes with friends to the level that, by the way, boys don't do that, right? So girls, it's a matter of but essentially, you look at their closet, and half of the stuff, it's not theirs. They exchange with other friends, and in reality, you can build a marketplace for that. Actually, there are few marketplaces for doing that. Instead of buying new stuff, then simply exchange stuff that we own and you are not going to use anymore. Look, I'm a very simple person. If there is stuff that I like, then I buy them at Amazon at the dozens, right? So I have 12 T-shirts like that because I like them. This is it, right? And I nearly don't have anything else in my closet. There are two types of T-shirts that I like, and this is it. But I realized that this is very different for my daughters, that they like to have different things for their mood or for their different days, different occasions. And keep on buying stuff doesn't make sense. And so they keep on exchanging stuff. And buying. Yeah, you need to, some of the stuff that you send over disappears, right? So you need to refill the closet. Cars, not a lot of them yet of doing, sharing cars, right? So we can think of Zipcar and in different models, but still not a lot people are willing to share their cars. And sometimes it's the transaction cost. So how complex is it to make it happen? Because this is where I live, and here is my car, and I'm traveling right now, so I don't need my car. So I'm okay with someone else using the car for now, right? But how that someone else is going to get to the car, and how exactly I'm going to get the car back on time, and so forth. So the transaction cost is a little bit more complex here. Not that it's not possible, it's certainly possible, and we see some examples, and it makes perfect sense when you think of not using the car throughout the entire day, right? So we are using the car. If we are here right now, it would have been okay if someone will take the car, drive around, go to a restaurant, come back on time, and we don't care, right? We do care in a lot of cases, but we shouldn't. One of the most important things that happens to a marketplace is that it always starts with an underutilized resource, right? So I have tickets for the game tonight, and I'm not going to show up because I'm here. Or it's perfectly okay for me to sell the tickets to someone else, right? So it starts with a person that has underutilized resource and trying to figure out how to sell that resource. And then comes the buyers, right? Because I'm going to offer the tickets for half price or whatever, and so obviously some people will show up and will buy these tickets. And when the marketplace starting to evolve, and there is more and more and more volume, and there is a demand, the supply will be professional sellers. So if you think of StubHub as an example, that started with people that ended up with a season ticket to the games, and they ran out of or ran into situations that they're not going to use that, they started to sell that. Over time, if there is enough demand there, then the venues, the teams, all the professional sellers will come and sell tickets in this marketplace as well. So when you think of eBay, it's me finding stuff at home that I don't need and I'm going to sell that, right? That's the model. But then you go into eBay and you see, okay, this seller actually have 700,000 reviews, right? So this is not a person, right? This is a store. And essentially this is the business of eBay, right? So stores are being either established or existing stores are selling as another distribution channel on eBay. And this is 90% of the deals there. If you think of StubHub, tickets, more than 90% of the deals, the venues, the teams are selling tickets through this marketplace. If this marketplace is successful, this is what's going to happen. The professional sellers will sell to consumer buyers in this marketplace. The evolution is that, first of all, it's non-professional sellers selling to buyers, then we have more buyers, then comes the professional sellers. Now, if we think of Airbnb as different, it's not. So at the beginning, it was someone that actually had, extra room, or maybe traveling and someone else can use the apartment while they're traveling. And then people start to realize that this is actually pretty good business. So they bought houses in order to let them at Airbnb. So semi-professional sellers. And then comes organizations, real estate agencies that basically say, we're gonna build something and let it out at Airbnb. So that's usually the evolution of marketplace. Essentially, if you look at the marketplace and you realize that most of the business is being done by professional sellers selling to buyers, then that's actually pretty mature and successful marketplace. Sharing resources, we mentioned that. So I'm okay with someone using my vacation house while I'm not using that. I actually don't have one, but if I would have one, then one of the reasons, by the way, that I don't have one is that I will look at it as a very underutilized resource, right? I look at it as waste. I don't need one. I like to go in different places, so I would need plenty of those. But even if I would like to go, once a year into the same place, then just the thought that for the rest of the 51 weeks of the year that would be stand up empty will make me decide that I don't want to have that. I will hire the one for the week that I want one. Carpool is a different story. I think I will touch base with that tomorrow morning when I speak about the problem of traffic. But in reality, carpool does not dramatically increase the utilization of the car, because most of the time the car is not being used. It's increased the utilizations of the roadways, because today, in average, we are 1.2 persons per vehicle. If you're starting to do more carpool, then obviously you increase the utilization of the roadways. So maybe we will finish up with a food for thought for tomorrow, and that will be startup strategy. So that will be the market leader, right? So are able to figure out product is needed in use, so product market fit. The market is large enough. The lifetime value is high, so we figure out a business model that works. User growth and globalization is figured out. So I know how to grow my user base. I know how to figure out how to reach multiple markets. And some X factors. Now, if you're a market leader, if it's clear that you're going to be a market leader in a large market, then you are a unicorn. Then you are a billion-dollar company. Then you are significant. Then you're actually being successful. Now, in order to do that, you need to line up all those. Usually the problem is that they're not lined up, that they're all over. Right? And so you try to figure out product market need, and it takes you part of the journey is maybe a year to figure that out, and eventually you put this star in place. And then you go and chase after the next one. And while you are doing that, this one is actually shifting, right? Or maybe there is an alternative. And so figuring out the strategy is actually essentially lining up all of them. And this is very, very hard. It's very hard, but actually you can start take a different approach towards figuring that out, and which one you need to figure out first, and which one you figure out next, and how long it will take you to figure that out, and what to do while you are in this phase. And so the startup strategy have different phases, and each one of them is a journey by itself, and it's a phase by itself that you can actually build and be successful in doing that when you understand the issues that are involved in this particular phase. Sometimes you simply ignore the rest of the phases, which is what we said about focus. It's not what we're doing, it's what we are not doing. So essentially we figured that out as becoming a market leader. Product market fit will be eventually measured by user retention, user satisfaction, user retention, net promoter score, whatever we can measure, basically say our product works and creates value to the level that users are actually using them. So there is a real need. We build a product that actually answering the need, product market fit. That's the first corner that we need to deal with. User acquisition at scale. Now this goes back, we can reach 10% market share, right? This goes back into the story that we are saying about the business model. We need to demonstrate to ourselves, first of all, and obviously to the rest of the market, that we can become scalable, that we can reach that amount of users. Now, if the total addressable market is much smaller than we think it is, right? So at Waze, you would imagine, okay, all the drivers, right? Wait a minute, not all the drivers. Only those that have smartphones, and only those that have data plans, because one of the countries that was the lagger in Latin America was Argentina. The price of data plans there was expensive. And so only until 2 years ago, when data plans become accessible there or inexpensive there, they started to use Waze. Before that, there was nearly no Waze users. Or we can take India, for example. So, India, if you think traffic jams here are bad, try India, right? And I know the traffic jams here are bad. And so we thought that this is going to be easy market to win, right? And then we figure out that we have no users there. Because as it turns out, if you have a smartphone, you also have a driver. If you have a driver, you sit in the back seat and you don't care. If you don't care, then there is no addressable market, right? So the perception of the problem amongst the addressable market was zero, no match, and so no market. So we can scale. And we can scale means that, look, there is no strategy of a market leader that says, I'm going to buy users. Unless you figure out a business model beforehand that you buy users at X and you get instantly X plus in return, right? Or you get X plus in a very short period of time. But other than that, user acquisition, paid user acquisition, exists only in the insertion to the market, does not exist when you scale. No, you just figure out that, let's say user acquisition in the US for an app like Waze would have cost $10, just an example, right? And there are probably somewhere between 80 to 100 million users of Waze in the US. So that means investing somewhere between $800 million to $1 billion in user acquisition. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't work that way. You can only use paid user acquisition at the beginning when you go into a new market. But if you haven't figured out how to scale at no cost, then you're not going to scale. Market size is big enough, so if you will figure out that I'm going to get 10% of the market, this is going to be big enough. You can basically show that if I'm going to get 10% of the market, that's going to be order of magnitude of $1 billion of revenues a year. And maybe 500 million. But this is significant business that is worthwhile going after. And we figure out the business model, right? So lifetime value. Sometimes we would be looking into return on investment of a user, right? So we can still spend money on marketing, but we know that the user that we acquired is going to return the cost of the acquisition within 3 or 6 months or something that is reasonable. Otherwise, we're gonna have very, very hard time to fund the growth. So essentially, just imagine that. Okay, let's say that a user cost me $10 and it takes me 6 months to return that $10 in revenues generated by this particular user. And the lifetime value might be 3 years, right? So much more than that. During this period of time, how do I fund the growth? I need money for that. Because otherwise, if I don't have growth, that's fine, right? I buy a user today. In 6 months, I'll have enough money to buy another user. And then in 6 months after that, I'll have enough time. This is not going to be fast enough, right? So obviously, if we have a model like that we spend money on user acquisition or marketing or whatever, and we know that the return on investment is such, then what we need to figure out is how do I fund the working capital, the growth. If I can figure that out, then that's perfect. Then I can grow. So the startup strategy is all about what do we do when. What is important when, how things evolve over time, and what we don't do. And so the first 7 years of a startup, right? Really, very simple. First 7 years. Product market fit. With no product market fit, this is the baseline for everything. If we don't have product market fit, we don't exist. We simply haven't created value. So product market fit is about creating value for the users. That's the most important thing. After we do that, there are different phases, right? So maybe it's about scale, maybe it's about going global, maybe it's about making money. You can shift those in the order, but product market fit has to be first. And sometimes you will figure out that which one is the second one, the one that you can actually reach significant milestones first. So if you would go and say, okay, I figure out product market fit, and now it's going to take me 3 years to figure out a business model, and 1 year to figure out globalization, I would vote for globalization. Because that will allow you to actually raise additional capital to keep on funding, keep on fueling the journey. And usually each one of those phases will take 2 to 3 years. Product market fit might be sooner, might be 18 months. But each one of those phases will take 2 to 3 years. Some of them can be done parallel, right? So in a lot of cases, you will try to figure out scalability and globalization at the same time. In particular, when you start to realize that, okay, if I want to reach 10% market share globally, then I need to figure out scale and I need to figure out globalization at the same time. So many cases they would be on the same time. They're not always relevant. So some examples, the problem does not exist everywhere. It's only in some places. So now we're starting to look into so what does it mean in each one of those phases? What do we do? And the first one is to decide what do we focus on. And focus means most important thing, right? And there might be different phases throughout this most important thing, this phase, or different sub-phases that we basically say this is the most important thing. This is what we're going to figure out. If we don't figure that out, we don't move to the next part. What is the product roadmap? What is the organization to support that? What kind of go-to-market do we need to support that? And I'll give you an example. Look, in product market fit, we are doing fast iterations of the product until the product is good enough. I don't need millions of users to do that. I need few users to do that, to get their feedback and do another iteration, get new users, 100 new users, get their feedback, do another iteration, and keep on doing that. I don't need VP marketing for that. I don't need marketing at all. I don't have a go-to-market strategy at this phase. I just need enough users to run fast cycles of the product. What's the budget? What's the funding? Can we fund ourselves in this phase? And do we need new funding for this phase? So if we're looking at product market fit, and tomorrow we're going to do a deep dive on the tools to actually do product market fit. then we have only one objective, right? So this is by the way, this is the only phase that has to be first. The rest can be second, third, fourth, fifth, doesn't matter. So we have one objective, to create value to the users, and we measure that by either retention or MAU, monthly active users, or usage, right? So there must be, but by the way, I'm obviously thinking of consumer services, but if you would come up with a different way, a different product that is B2B, then you will figure out what is the proof that you generate value to your customers. What is the metrics that you measure there? And this is what you're going to use. And you can only get funded once you accomplish this phase, right? So you get funded before, and during this phase, you cannot get funded. Because everyone will look at it and you say, okay, but you are already running 1.5 years into the doing, and you haven't proven that there is value in what you're doing, and you cannot get funded during the phase. You can get funded once you demonstrate that I have consumer product with sustainable retention, significant retention, high usage, whatever it is. Then you can get funded and say, okay, I demonstrated product market fit. I can now look to get funded in order to move to the next phase. Product development starts after we launch, right? So if the question when to launch, right now. Yesterday was even better. Right now, you're maybe in the middle of the class, so immediately after that. But this is where you want to launch the service. You want to start to get feedback from the users. Otherwise, we are not making progress. No marketing, no product roadmap. The only product roadmap is about improving those, right? So the MAU, the retention, the usage, or whatever metrics that we set to ourselves as the important metrics to prove that we have a product that creates value, that's the only product roadmap that we have. We don't add features that do not improve that. We don't add features that maybe will be used for different things. We don't care about those. Okay, I want you to think of LinkedIn for a second. Now, this is the story that I heard, so I don't even know if it's true, but it makes perfect sense to me. So when LinkedIn started, they generated the first roadmap of the product, right? And they sat down and defined the roadmap, and there were 30 different features on the roadmap. And they basically say, this is the bare necessity. We cannot go live without those features. And then they sat down once again and they say, this is impossible. You cannot build that 30 features. It will take us a long period of time. Let's reduce that. And they reduced that to 20. And then they reduced that to 10 features. And they basically say, this is our MVP. This is the minimum, the bare necessity, that we cannot even launch the product without those 10 features. We are many years after this date. How many of the features, of those 10 features, were developed? 1. In order for us to create value, we need to solve the problem. That can be single feature. It's not about the features. The role of the product management or the product marketing is not to add features. It's to increase usage. And usually that will be about reducing features and not adding features, because then we make it simple. Okay. So two more things about business development. Probably not. Probably not. Only if it helps. Now it needs to help this, right? How exactly, what kind of business development we can bring that will help the product to improve the product? Probably not. And no marketing. We mentioned the organization is very, very, very lean. So we have a couple of developers, maybe 3-4 developers that keep on doing that. Maybe a product manager that is working on improving the criteria, and the CEO, and this is it. We don't need marketing. We don't need support. Maybe we do need one support person, but not a lot. We need someone with business intelligence, someone that will help us to understand the numbers, because otherwise we are missing them. Now, if the CEO by himself is reading all the numbers and looking at the daily reports, then it might be okay. If not, we need someone to crank the numbers and figure out how we are making progress on those targets. And the budget is very slim as a derivative of the organization. Why? Because we cannot get funded until we are done. And if we cannot get funded, and it usually takes longer than we think it is, then we want really thin, slim budget, really nothing fancy, right? If we can get people there that we pay them low salary, then let's do that. So product market fit, one objective, creating value to the users. When we move to scale, first of all, we get funded. We completed product market fit. We want to scale, we get funded. Otherwise, we will run out of cash in the middle of getting funded, in the middle of trying to scale. Focus is now on scale. Product roadmap, we want to improve the retention. We want to create awareness. Maybe we want to figure out how users can bring other users. So maybe redistribution or virality of the product. Maybe we need to support the volume. We don't need to support the volume before there is a volume. But we will need to figure out how to support the volume as soon as we start to get there. You know, if your system crashes because of overload, that's worth celebrating. That actually means that you have a lot of users. That's good news. And this is really important because if we try to build a system that will not crash, then we invest the resources on the wrong timing. We don't care about it before we have users. To a certain extent, I would say I would deal with scalability of the product after it crashes. I will deal with fraud after I see fraud. Before that, I will be building wrong solutions. Once I see fraud, I can realize, okay, this type of fraud I can see, I'm now going to prevent that. Even worse than that, I would say, you know what, if you run into a fraud once, you don't care. If you run into the same fraud twice, then solve it. Right? And then keep on waiting. And then there will be a different types of fraud and a different types of fraud. And every time that you run into them multiple times, then solve that. Beforehand, you don't care. At the end of the day, it's going to cost you nickels and dimes compared to the progress that you need to make. And so you don't try to prevent problems. You want to run into them and then solve them. Otherwise, you solve them ahead of time and you don't even know if you overinvested or underinvested in trying to solve them if you haven't faced them. So you only solve problems that you face. The organization needs to scale, and in many cases that means that you might need support, you might need different types of the organization that beforehand you haven't had, then build them. The go-to-market deals with where do we go? And the approach here should be a significant market that is the easiest to win. Now, here in Brazil, it's easy. That's Brazil. It's a significant market, and it's easier to win if you already started here. But if you're coming from a different place or you want to go to other countries, then I want you to figure out a market, a geography, that it's easier to win. Now, if you think the US is easiest to win, that's the hardest one to win. User acquisition is expensive. PR doesn't work there. There is all the competition is there. It's the hardest market to win. If you'll go to Mexico, then it's a significant market that it's probably easy to win. If you go to Indonesia, significant market that is easy to win. If you go to Italy, probably significant market that is easy to win. If you go to UK, hard to win. Expensive, the same, even more expensive than the US. If you go to China, nearly impossible to win. So figure out the market that is significant enough and easiest to win for your scaling. The budget is shifting towards scale, right? So we are looking to bring more users. And that means that we're going to invest more and more and more in marketing. We're going to invest small amount of money in a lot of trials. So we're going to test different things. Once we find something that works, we're going to invest heavily in that. Now that might be that we try user acquisition on Facebook, and we try SEO, and we try PR, and we try on the street physical advertisement. We try different things, and we try to go into groups and into forums and into different places, and finally we find something that works. As soon as we do, we start to invest heavily in that. Now it's very possible that we'll go to a different country and it's going to be different. And so we start with all the same tests that we are doing on media buying, on user acquisition, on PR, on TV, on whatever. And the same goes with business development. The problem with business development is that most of it doesn't work, right? It takes time to build, and it doesn't work, right? So you would imagine that I have a mobile application, so I would maybe use the mobile operator to distribute that, and maybe I would use TV channels to partner with, and maybe I would have whatever, right? So gas stations to partner with. And you try many of those, and most of them simply don't work. Now, they don't work because we want them to do something that they don't know how to do. We want them to bring us users. They don't know. If they would know how to bring users, they would bring to themselves users. And that's a problem, right? But still, we keep on trying because, in general, 10% of the trials that we are doing are actually going to make an impact. So if we want 5 partners, that means that we need to have 50 dialogues. Global, it's actually, at the end of the day, you look at the G20 and this is your market, right? We don't care about small countries. They are insignificant in terms of business. They are not going to help us if we are looking at the strategy of building a unicorn or becoming a market leader. The fact that we will have significant market share in small country doesn't help us. The fact that we'll have significant market share in large country does help us. So we don't care about the rest of the world. The rest of the world will follow. We will eventually figure out a way to go to smaller countries as well. But we are aiming at the larger economies. And business developments become significant. The first country, CEO goes. CEO maybe founder goes to the first country and figuring out the cookbook that we need to build, how to go to a new country. And then after we define that, and after we have a cookbook, then we can hire a business development or a go-to-market general manager or whatever that will start to duplicate that in different countries. So monetization is a very complex part. And the first thing to remember is that this is a journey by itself. It's going to take 3 years to figure out. If you will tell today, at the beginning, this is my business model, and you will tell the buyer that this is what you're going to sell them and this is how much it's going to cost, they're going to laugh. You have nothing to sell right now except a concept. And it takes 3 years to tune that, to figure out exactly how do you sell, what's the value proposition, who is the buyer, how much they are willing to pay, how are you going to build a pricing model for that. And by the way, pricing model will increase tenfold. So initially you think that you will figure out that you're actually getting You take the amount of revenues that you're generating and you divide it by the number of users, and you get an average revenue per user of X. In 3 years, that's going to be 10X. Because otherwise, you'll stop on day one. You'll figure out, okay, it doesn't generate enough revenues. It's not going to be sustainable business. And this is significant. It's a journey by itself. What is also significant, if it's going to take 3 years, you want to have enough funding for those 3 years, because otherwise you would die in the middle of the desert. You're trying to figure out the business model, and you haven't figured out the business model, and you are in the phase that everyone expects you to figure out the business model, and you don't have enough funding to do that. So raise enough capital beforehand to be able to go through that period of time. I think this is it for today. I actually ended up with I need to drink something, and I would figure out that probably the translator would need to drink something as well. So thank you very much for this evening.